Welcome to another episode of How to Watch a Movie as a Christian. I'm Javen.
I'm Riley.
And I'm Ben.
How to watch Peter Pan and Wendy. Yep, as a Christian. This was a movie that came out around late April, directed by David Lowery. He's the same director.
Horror film director.
He also directed Pete's Dragon, so he's familiar with kids' movies in general. And he directed Peter Pan and Wendy, a fascinating movie that just dropped. It went directly to Disney Plus. It's not well received, Peter Pan and Wendy, and we have thoughts on that. But from what I read, like scripts for it, and David Lowery was working on scripts for it several years ago. And Bob Iger stepped in, maybe 6 months ago. So
this was well underway.
Underway. I think production started in 2021, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But so the play was originally written in around 1904. Had several different names. The author kept adding to it, or adjusting it, and then eventually released a novel called Peter and Wendy in around 1911. And the original author, his name's J.M. Barrie. Fascinating dude that he was like born in a family of believers. His parents wanted him to go into the ministry. And he's like, actually, I want to be a writer. And he had this whole thing with his family of like, how can I write, but also minister to people? And one of the works that he made a bunch of stuff, but he also made Peter Pan, which is his most famous
Right, and
work.
there's a lot of myth around the story, right, about like Finding Neverland dramatizes him hanging out with this widow lady and her kids and getting to know them and writing a story for them, which ends up being Peter Pan. And it's a lot about childhood, the spirit of innocence and the spirit of childhood, and yet the necessity of growing up and how to grow up. And this film leans hard into growing up wrong. Which is like
a lot of stuff.
It's like you're taking a review of Peter Pan and taking the themes and putting them into your script. The original Peter Pan was not so on the nose with its themes. Oh, Captain Hook grew up wrong. It's like, duh, it's a metaphor. It's
an allegory.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this one like takes a lot of those insights that are in the script of the originals, but just puts it on the page in a way that's obvious.
I learned a lot about the original Peter Pan from just hearing you guys talk about it. I don't know a lot about the Peter Pan story other than what you guys have told me, and it almost seems like they made this movie with about as much knowledge as I have of it. And I'm just curious about why they, you guys have a lot to say because you know the history of it, you know the meaning behind it, and it seems like they kind of did gloss over a lot of the deeper meanings of it to try and maybe overlay some more modern stories or things that they're trying to share. We've talked about it before, the Lost Boys being a ragtag group of boys and girls in this one,
right?
And Wendy's like, but you're not all boys. And then she goes, so what? And then Wendy looks at the camera and goes, I guess it doesn't matter.
Which
and I was
is
like, oh, okay, on the nose, you're
I know. I see what you're saying.
And I'm like, okay, it's clear what you're trying to get at. Whatever. You do you. But there's meaning to the Lost Boys, right?
What
am I tapping on here?
Yeah, so I get part of it, and maybe not many people know fully what the original story of Peter Pan is. So Wendy and her brothers are in a nursery. Father comes in and is like, why don't you grow up? Ah! There's this whole thing where he's yelling at them and he's
scolding them.
Yeah. And there's this conversation behind, in the back of everyone's minds of Wendy's been telling these stories about Peter Pan and a shadow and all these things. And when that happens, Peter Pan shows up. Now, Peter Pan in Neverland in the story, it's like an allegory. It's her to overanalyze it. It's like her subconscious. It's not a real place.
The 1953 cartoon, the narrator at the beginning calls Peter the spirit of youth.
Right. And so there's this whole like symbolic thing going on in the original story that Peter and Wendy, or Peter Pan and Wendy, they like try to flesh it out. So they're adding girls to the Lost Boys, but you're completely missing the point. The Lost Boys are not actual boys. They represent boys that are stuck in not growing up and playing and escapism and fun and only fun and not having adulthood.
A fairy tale by nature is two-dimensional, right? Peter is the spirit of youth.
Yep.
The Lost Boys represent male lostness.
Yes.
And remaining in childhood and not growing up. And if you
Exactly.
do so, you are lost. Captain Hook represents adulthood gone wrong. The kind of
They represent
So
that.
they clearly did some things differently. We can acknowledge that. Of course, we have our feelings on that. But I really am curious. Why is that so bad? What is it messing up? What are we losing with the representation? Like, they're adding in representation, which I think we all agree. That's a good thing overall.
Oh my gosh. The diversity thing, which has been part of the conversation or controversy of Peter Pan, to me, that doesn't matter at all. Like, you can do that as much as you want in this story. It's fine.
I feel the same.
And so to me, the idea of like representing things correctly is fine, and having diversity, that has literally nothing to do with it. That's not the problem with this movie.
What we're saying is diversity, proper representation, maybe, and how maybe they are saying it too, maybe correcting some issues from the first one. There's a disclaimer on the first one, right? Great, good things. What are we losing, though? What did we lose? Because it would be a little naive to say that we're just gaining something there.
So a couple of things. First of all, let's talk about girls being in the Lost Boys. In the original story of Peter Pan explains to Wendy that the reason why it's only the Lost Boys is because girls are too clever, and they have a proclivity to have a motherhood spirit, to mature faster.
This is biologically true. They age faster.
So it's almost demeaning.
Quicker.
It's almost a little demeaning
So-
to women to have them in the Lost Boys.
It kind
Was
of
part-
a little bit.
The point is that in the original story, they're not there. And they're not there for a reason, because the story is trying to say something about boyhood. And the lostness that comes with remaining a child for
Because it's
too long.
speaking to the two boys. So Wendy represents something else. So the Lost Boys are representing the lostness of the two boys fighting in their room. So what about Wendy then? Or is there more of this too? I kind of started spacing
Wendy-
out at that point in the movie.
You look at the 1953 animated musical version. What I find really interesting about the way that the writers tackle that is Tinkerbell represents immaturity within womanhood as well.
Insecurity of her image.
Oh, interesting.
Yes,
Jealousy.
body image issues,
jealousy.
She tries to kill Wendy, and she actually betrays where the Lost Boys and Peter Pan's hideout is to Captain Hook.
Is that part of the original play?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But in the musical version, that is something at play there. And what they're trying to explore is like, yes, there's immaturity present within boys. That's what it generally looks like. But there's also immaturity within girls. And that's generally what that looks like.
And it's different.
And it's different. And in this modern version, you have none of that. Okay, there was a scene in it where it's like the only thing she says, she goes up to Wendy and says, "Thank you for seeing me."
Thank you for hearing.
Oh, thank you for hearing.
And I just went,
What? You didn't say anything. You didn't do anything. You just were a vessel for pixie dust.
Yeah,
that was your whole thing.
She helped them
she's
fly.
she's literally a salt shaker. That's not the only flaw that Javen's pointing out. He's pointing also to Wendy herself, who's been lumped into that same thing, where at the beginning of the story, she's sword fighting. Whereas at the beginning of the 1953 version, she's the one telling the stories. She is a preteen, maybe semi-young adult who's ready to grow up. She's willing. She's picking up toys and Michael, John, she's becoming a motherly voice.
Yes.
And that's her character. She's willing to be a grown-up. So her presence in Neverland is contrasted with everybody's immaturity. Tinkerbell's, Peter's, specifically Peter's, the mermaids, which are like a symbol of raw pornographic sexuality, right? Like Peter just has these muses, these mermaids that are like these half-naked sexual creatures that he can just flirt with any time. That's pure immaturity. And Wendy's like, "Pfft," you know.
Totally.
And Tiger Lily, who represents like the helpless, in the eyes of a young man, the helpless damsel, and I can save her, and I'm a hero. And Wendy's just like, ugh, you know, the whole thing. She's growing up, and it's her presence to read and to instruct and to be a motherly, parental, grown-up figure that just enchants everyone.
So I watch this movie. Who am I tracking with? Who's like my leading figure showing me the way out? It didn't really seem like there was
Peter Pan and
'cause
Wendy. There's no
Peter Pan and Wendy, that's what I'm
deconstruct
saying.
it into oblivion.
because maybe that's why I just was so incredibly bored.
Yeah.
I don't. Is it because it
Agreed.
lost the thing that was kind of pulling me through?
There's no driving narrative force.
I didn't feel like
Riley and I were texting about this last night. The only thing
you can
the
just add
movie
me to that
has-
thread anytime.
I know. I'm sorry. He texted me. I don't know. He texted our group chat.
That's right.
And then
That's
texted
right.
me.
I'm also here.
No, I thought maybe you might be asleep. It was like 10 p.m.
You thought I might be, and you thought a text would wake me up. I'm not offended at all. I was probably fast asleep.
Our whole conversation, which was so good and amazing, and
Cool,
you were
yeah.
left out.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
Gosh, what was my point?
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, we were talking about how the whole movie, the driving narrative force of it is, guys, it's Peter Pan, but not.
Yeah, like here's a good example. In the original, Wendy is kind of the integrated, mature adult who still treasures the spirit of youth.
She still has childlike wonder.
Yes,
Yeah.
whereas her father is like, oh, these bedtime stories, put enough of this silliness, right?
Yeah.
That's why his voice is Captain Hook's voice. And this is a tradition
Amazing.
in the stage play that began with the stage play and is continued through the cartoon. And basically everything except this version. It's like they don't understand the tradition.
Did they just not?
No, they don't know what they're doing.
No.
But my point is, Wendy is this grown-up who loves Peter, right? Peter himself is this immature buffoon who can't grow up, right? But she has integrated him into herself. Whereas this Wendy, in this version, I think the moment you can point to is this, when she slaps Peter in the face.
Yeah. What in the world?
What the heck?
Well, that was fun.
And I was like, oh. And I woke Brittany up. I said, Brittany, you have to watch this. I rewound it. And then she watched it. I showed her that 30-second scene. And she's like, Disney sucks. And she went back to sleep.
Okay, for real. What why?
I can't remember.
It's these lines and these actions of these characters that they don't follow any motivation of a character. It feels like a writer going, stick it to them.
Maybe Brittany's right. Maybe she's like really right about this.
My wife is
Fascinating.
the best discerner of hidden messages. She's like, within 2 seconds, this sucks. I'm out. She's got the best vibe on things like that. And so she didn't have to watch the movie. She's like, I could tell this is. I'm like, oh, the filmmaking's cool.
It is
Like
cool.
the cinematography's cool, other
Yeah.
than the color grade.
To give it its due. So original story is aiming on like growing up, childlike wonder. Yes, you can be an adult and still enjoy life and have fun and have magic in the world. The ending of the story, the conclusion is Wendy gives that in some capacity to her parents.
Yeah,
Her
the dad
sees
looks
the
up
ship.
and goes, oh, I remember this when I was a kid.
Yeah,
Remember?
exactly. So what is this movie, the Peter Pan and Wendy, the modern version, just to give it its due? What is it trying to say?
We're like that Pulp Fiction meme.
To add to like a Peter Pan adaptation that's so loud within this conversation is Hook. Hook is a live action Peter Pan adaptation with a twist on the story.
Deconstructs the themes.
Deconstructs the themes, is still faithful to the themes. The main point is still the main point, and removes the stereotypes. The boys still play cowboys and Indians, but it's not operating off of offensive stereotypes that are degrading to Native Americans.
I didn't watch it.
Hook? Dude, that movie slaps.
Whoa, you've never seen Hook?
No.
He's got such joy ahead.
Do I?
You live with such hope.
Wow.
Your future is so bright.
Wow.
Dude, it's got
This
Robin Williams
movie-
and Zuko
This-
in the same movie directed by Steven Spielberg.
Dude, this movie,
What have I been doing?
to quote Javen, this movie slaps. It really is. It's the movie that this movie could not be.
Yeah.
It really is. So the way it deconstructs the themes is that the theme is that Peter eventually came back from Neverland, along
To
with
the
all the
real
Lost
world.
Boys, to the real world, and he grew up and he became pirate-ish, right? So he has to make a trek back to Neverland to rediscover the spirit of youth of Peter Pan. So somehow they convey that without saying, "Oh, he's going back to eternal boyhood." That's not it. He's just recovering the spirit of Peter Pan while still being a grown-up.
Which is kind of like what grown-ups do watching the movie.
Exactly. That's why Peter Pan in its themes is so rich. Yes, Peter Pan is eternal boyhood, and yes, ideologically that's incorrect. But at the same time, we also want that.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
Wendy maintains. Even in Hook. In Hook, she's like 95 years old. Maggie Smith, who's still 95 years old. She plays Wendy as an old woman who still maintains the spirit of youth.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Oh yeah, I was thinking. Corinne and I went to our in-laws the other day. So Corinne's folks, my wife, and my father-in-law Doug was like playing with my little kid Rowan, and he picked him up and was like teaching him how to run around the house, and he was being a kid. He had the childlike spirit, and it was so fun. That to me, it's such a beautiful thing when adults can just be like, let's be kids. I don't know. Like, let's not only talk about serious things and be boring and sit down.
It has its time and place.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
There's a
totally.
time and place to like pick up your grandson and play in the garden with him, or just laugh at him crawling.
So what did you think then of this film trying to take some of those themes, I don't know, and maybe, I don't know what they're trying to do, deepen them. So Hook used to be a lost boy.
Right.
But he, went back to the real world, grew up, came back.
Right.
couldn't-
Because of his trauma,
But Peter Pan cut off his hand. I couldn't fathom it. I had
I feel
zero.
better. I didn't understand that. So.
I was like, I
Strange.
hate Peter. I hate Hook. I don't like Wendy because I don't really understand where she's going. I don't like anybody. I hate everybody in this movie.
It's really true. It's
so unfortunate.
The
but it's
person
true.
I liked or disliked the least. So I didn't like him, but I hated him the least was Hook.
Right.
And I still did not super like him. And I think it was partially just the actor playing him. I have more of a relationship other than Jim Gaffigan. Jim
He's
Gaffigan's
so good.
just in there as
Jim Gaffigan, I think,
Smee.
did good as Mr. Smee.
No.
You know?
No, I don't think
Well,
so.
compared
I
to the
thought he was good.
1953 version,
Oh,
no.
He didn't even
yeah.
kind of do the voice.
Yeah.
Try it.
we should all hands on deck. All hands on deck.
Here's where I got truly confused. He kills Peter in a violent way. I was like, oh, right?
Across the chest.
Yikes. I don't know how Peter came back to life.
No, because the Native American woman went there and rubbed moss on his chest.
I don't
Works
understand
every
what that.
time.
I don't.
When you
I don't know
rub
what
the
that
moss-
meant. The part that really, truly made me facepalm was the climax, the finale of the movie. So when Peter's holding on to Hook and
Right. And then
apologizing,
Yeah.
and saying sorry, and he's like crying for what he did to him in the past. The problem fundamentally is the emotional depth of your film happened in the past, off screen. I never saw it. I don't know what happened between them.
Right.
I have a vague idea, but it was only described in exposition. You're trying to cash in on an emotional bank that happened off screen,
Right.
and it doesn't work.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyways, Peter apologizes. I'm like, oh, if Captain Hook they reconciled, I'd go, oh, that's a different take. Interesting. Thematically cohesive.
Right.
But he still fell off?
Yeah. So Peter's holding Hook and he's like, you can fly, just have happy memories and then we'll be reunited and reconciled. And Hook goes, I don't have happy memories. And then his hook falls off and
Which
he
made
falls
me go,
in the ocean.
poor guy.
Yeah.
He has no happy memories. And it's probably Peter's fault, I'm imagining. It removed my favorite scene from the cartoon, which is when at the very end, when he's standing in the crocodile's jaws and he goes, ah, and he and he bites really fast and he goes, ah, That is so funny. And Smee's rowing the boat and he goes under the boat as it rows. It's so funny. Okay, so Peter Pan's written by J.M. Barrie, right? Brilliant storyteller, obviously. Peter Pan in the public consciousness for a century. Whoa.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the 1953 film is overseen by Walt, who is another J.M. Barrie. Like, he's a once-in-a-generation guy, right? Storyteller, brilliant people. We have people like that still. They're around. But they didn't make this movie. This is the problem. I think the fundamental problem is that the storytellers are not trying, they don't know what a story is meant to do. It reminds me of, like, let's say, like, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6. Jesus has these points he's making, right? Now let's take Matthew 6 and just plug it right into Matthew 13.
Right.
But Matthew 13, Jesus is telling stories, parables, one after another, right? You cannot take the Sermon on the Mount and put it in Matthew 13. It doesn't work. A story is not a sermon. And that's one of the problems, is that Walt Disney, J.M. Barrie knew this. They're storytellers. This one is told by preachers or something, where they have some message from some other source, and they're just plopping it in the middle of this scene. And it feels preachy.
It's really devaluing story. Take a cue from Jesus, people. What a good storyteller. And what he accomplished through those stories. Sheesh.
This has been How to Watch a Movie as a Christian. Well, I'm Javen.
No.
No.
No,
I'll
no.
see you at church.
There it is.
There we go. Cool.